What's up, beautiful people? It's Friday, and we are going to get started really soon with this Freestyle Friday. I'm Stuby Kas, and we're going to have a guest on today that's going to speak to, how we use hip hop and freestyle to build. And when I say build, we're talking about architecture, but we're also talking about architecture not just as a field for creating housing structures and commercial buildings and stuff like that, but architecture has a lot of depth to it, and it requires a certain level of design, a certain level of understanding of systems and stuff like that. So we're going to get into it with the hip hop architect Michael Ford, and I'm going to bring him on right now as we get started here. Let me just give me a second here. Sent. We are about to begin. Hope everybody out there is doing well. Welcome to the Life is a Freestyle Freestyle Friday. This is episode, I don't know, maybe 16 or 17 or something like that. But thank you for coming on, Michael Ford, the hip hop architect.
Yo, what's up, man? Glad to be on and join this conversation, bro.
Yeah, definitely. So, here on Freestyle Fridays, we talk about the metaphor life as a freestyle. We try to make sure that there is, some extensive conversation around the concept of, how we take this metaphor and apply it to life, apply it to things outside of just rap and hip hop. But we do see that, hip hop, of course, just like all art, imitates life. And, just as architecture is a form of art, as much as it is a form of, kind of structural design and infrastructure building and stuff like that. So tell people a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to get into the 16 bars of this Freestyle Friday.
Yo, so again, name is Mike Ford, also known as the hip hop architect. So originally from Detroit, born and raised there. Now live in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm an architectural designer. I worked on a number of different projects. Most recently working on the Universal Hip Hop Museum, which is a project in the Bronx.
Shout out to that. Thank you for that.
Being led by Nas and Mass Appeal, some folks like Curtis Blow, some of the legends involved in that project as well. And I've collaborated with SOSA in the past on an event, so I'm happy to meet some other folks in SOSA, man. So glad to be in the conversation.
All right. So shout out to Nas with his Mass Appeal business. And then, of course, we have, the Society of Spoken Art, which is represented here with the Full Circle team that runs the Life is a Freestyle page that is hosting this Freestyle Friday. So I wanted to say what's up to everybody that's in the chat. Make sure that you're hitting that like button. If you don't already follow us for more of these every Friday. So we're going to get right into it. So as we speak on this metaphor, and I know because you have a familiarity with SOSA, then there's this understanding that, the way we look at metaphor is way deeper than most people look at it. So how do you feel about way deeper, right? So how do you feel about the metaphor life is a freestyle? Does it resonate with you? Do you have any nuance to kind of add to it or any input on your side?
Yeah, so I thought about that, man, and I think I can agree with that. It's no major pushback on that one. Life is a freestyle. You make decisions in life, and you have to build on them. Just like, you watch somebody freestyle, something comes out, you got to deal with it. You got to build on it. You got to make it better. But the more and more you live life, similar to the more and more you practice your craft, you get better at it. So I think, life is a freestyle. I can definitely run with that one. And, sometimes that freestyle might be just getting something off your chest, or you might have to go at somebody.
Right.
That's what life is all about, man. You want to live as humbly as possible, but sometimes you have to go at somebody.
Right. And so as I post this and just pin it to the chat here so everybody can see how to follow you, what would you say is uniquely the approach, is uniquely the hip hop approach to architecture?
Yeah. So what makes hip hop architecture unique is, we're looking at architecture that embodies all of the cultural elements that makes up hip hop. So historically, architecture has always been this culmination, if you will, of a series of cultural elements, right? Whether that is something in Catholicism or with Catholics, right? And we have these cathedrals, like that. Those architectural pieces embody all of the elements of that culture,
right?
And that's how I view hip hop architecture. It is something that is derived from our culture, and for me, what makes it extremely unique is the similarities between the culture and architecture, right?
Okay.
Most of our work come from studios, right? We talk about the studio, right? Architects work in the studio. That's where the lab for MCs. But that's at a surface level and very basic. But there's something about the rhythm, the cadence, the patterns and structures that we create as architects and designers. I think the rhythms and patterns that are within, some of your top MCs, some of your top lyricists, they create some rhythms and patterns that we have not created or seen in architecture just yet. So my goal is bringing this creativity that it's not just in MCs, it's b-boy and it's graffiti writers, etc. They all have these transcending styles that can be brought into into architecture. So my whole goal is trying to allow hip hop artists to express themselves in a new medium, which is art.
Right. And that's a field that, a lot of hip hop artists have not necessarily invested in heavily. We know that a lot of hip hop artists come from, kind of urban areas where, inner cities don't really provide a lot of, expansion and understanding of, how to build. It's just whatever's there already is what you have to deal with, and you make do with the best that you got. So we know that every building starts as an idea, and just as every song, just as every piece of art. So sometimes, the idea fits a need that is requested, and sometimes it's just to express. It's just, an idea that you want to just kind of get out into the world. Are there any parts of architecture that include or maybe require freestyling?
Yeah. So, there's an approach to architecture. Like when a project is first started, what a lot of firms or designers might want their client to do is something called a design charrette.
Say that one more time.
It's called a charrette.
Okay. How you spell that?
It's CHARETTE.
Oh, okay. So that sounds French, huh?
Yeah, and it's a term that it came from academia, and it was when artists who are in school, their professors would drive a cart around, and you would have a set amount of time to complete a project. All right. And you put it on a cart as the professor, walks around, collects the work.
I see.
But how we use charrettes here would be, you have a set amount of time to design or come up with as many ideas for a certain topic. And that's where freestyling, I think, in architecture comes up. Most of those charrettes sometimes are in competitive nature, so it could be more of a battle, right? And it's, a lot of times during charrettes, you don't know the topic until you get there. Until you sit down, the paper is out or the modeling material is out, and then you jump right into the charrette. So you are coming up with ideas on the fly. But then there's usually a team. So you're not only producing your own piece, you're freestyling with multiple other people. So if you can imagine going, bar for bar or with 4 other people on the squad.
Right. So it's kind of like a rigmarole a little bit, where it's like, okay, I got this idea. What about you? And I got this idea, and this is how we can do that. And I'm build on that, piggybacking off of that. This is how we, So it's kind of like it's like a cipher. It's like a cipher.
It is, and what's dope about that is the first time when I was working on a hip hop museum, I was like, yo, we should do a charrette, to get this idea going.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna say who it was, but they was like, yo, what the fuck is a charrette? and no bullshit, I was like, yo, it's like a cipher. It was like, oh, so basically we're throwing some ideas out there.
Right.
Bet.
Yeah. And freestyle, in my estimation, I would say freestyle kind of exists in the mind first anyway. So like, when you're given a challenge or a structure to kind of play around inside of, the freestyle begins here, and it can continue to evolve in here the entire time until you actually put it out into either a drawing or use your words, or you actually, build the structure. So, there's definitely a lot of, it sounds like there's a lot of hip hop that's kind of already embedded into architecture, so that if anybody was kind of from the background of hip hop that wanted to get into architecture, there's already kind of a structure that's understandable, that's kind of translatable to being able to kind of step into that in a way that makes sense to the way that you would maybe kind of conceptualize a rhyme scheme, or an overall idea for a rhyme. So
yeah, exactly, man. I think there's some things that are unique to people in hip hop, that people that grew up on hip hop, people, and then when you have artists who gets involved with architecture, it's a higher level than just people who grew up in the culture, because there's some skill sets like math, some things that we do intuitively that we might not pick up on. And the mathematics of, counting, estimating, bars, right? We're coming up with structure. We're able to see patterns that, again, you're being challenged to imagine architecturally. And not only can we see them, but we've made the world love the patterns that we can put together, right? Everybody's emulating them.
Very true.
Can we extract those patterns that we put together? Most of the time it's sonic experiences, but can we take those sonic experiences and make them something tangible? Can you hold, can you touch, can you feel your words? And once you do that, is it just as powerful as the language that we've created in hip hop? Exactly.
And I want to say this part because I feel like this is unique to architecture. But like when you go back into ancient history, like Kemet and way back into Nubia and stuff like that, you have these buildings that they had. I was doing some research before, where the buildings were meant as kind of medical facilities, and what they would do inside of those buildings was they would resonate a sound, and they would sit the patient on the center table of this building, and the sound would echo off of the walls in such a way that the actual resonance frequency of the audio of the sound, or of whatever is kind of being kind of permeated through these walls, the structure was built in such a way that it could actually medically influence the person's body and heal them. So this was something that was understood well before modern day, architecture and the way we understand architecture today. So even taking an idea or crafting a building in such a way that it can actually affect the real world, and with sound, and by using the concept of sound to kind of reverse engineer the building of a structure, so that you can kind of work with what our bodies or the nature around us can already kind of resonate with. So that's a very interesting thing there that you said. So let me move on to the next question, because we definitely got a lot here, and I want to make sure we get to as many as possible. Earlier you mentioned, there are kind of these primal elements of hip hop that we express, not only through our music and the way we tell stories and where we come from, but also, the elements, right, that we call like the DJ, the breakdance, the MC, the graffiti artist, and even beatboxing as well. So if the foundation of hip hop is the DJ, without whom, of course, there would be no space for further structure, would you say that the rhythm and rhyme combined of an MC that kind of puts the rhyme and the words together on top of that DJ foundation resemble the wild architectural structures we see that already exist out there, like the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles? There's another building in LA that was recently just built. It's there's an automotive museum on the corner of like La Brea and Wilshire that has these like really wavy structures and stuff like that. So would you say that those kind of structures are like freestyle? Would you say that they're like rhyme schemes? Would you say that they're very hip hop influenced, even though the person that may have designed them isn't necessarily from hip hop?
So absolutely not. It is nowhere near, rhyme schemes and rhythms coming together, right? I don't think they represent what hip hop architecture could be. And the reason why is a couple of things. One, the Walt Disney Concert Hall, designed by Frank Gehry, an amazing architect. But it is, architecture, just like music, it evokes certain like savory emotions and memories, right? You can listen to a song and it brings back certain memories. Architecture does the same thing. And usually the architect is able to place those memories within that structure. And that's exactly what the Walt Disney Concert Hall is for Frank Gehry. He was, it's like fish scales, the texture, the facade, those metal panels. Yeah. And he talks about his memories of watching his grandmother, cook gefilte fish. And he would watch, the fish before she made the meal. He would watch them swim in the bathtub and see the light shimmer off of the fish bodies. And that's his memory that he was putting, in that structure. And I think that we have certain memories,
unique memories,
experiences as people of color or people that are a part of hip hop culture that are not represented architecturally. So I don't think, hip hop and architecture will result in one of these isms like modernism or any of the other isms. It will be something that's unique that embodies our stories, and an LA structure might be different from something in the Midwest, right? Detroit or Chicago. Then that might be totally different from Atlanta or Mississippi, right? But I see structures being influenced again by that lyrical dexterity that is within MC. So I'm always trying to extract our stories, our patterns, our rhythms, and whether that ends up being something whimsical or something a little more straightforward, I think it's again that story now that Frank Gehry can always tell about his grandmother. Where's our grandmother's story? Right? So that's what I think hip hop architecture allows us to do.
That's a bar right there for sure. I much appreciate you being able to kind of enlighten us on that one. So we have a comment here in the chat. Brooke Barton says, Mike was one of my first professors. He was influential in my design thinking, and I wouldn't be who I am today without him. I would recommend his TEDx talk to anyone interested in design. So shout out to Brooke Barton, and shout out to you for being that teacher, that professor.
Yeah, shout out to Brooke, man. Yeah, thanks for that note, man.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. So, how many elements can a person or an architect mix together when looking at architectural solutions? Like we talk about the elements of hip hop. We talk about certain elements of architecture, like the facade, or the kind of the way that you deal with lighting and stuff like that. There's the material, the overall aesthetics, how you use energy as a part of that building structure, and things like that. How many different elements can you mix together, and what are your favorite elements to mix together?
That's a tough question. It's like it's limitless, right? You can be inspired by or challenged by any and everything in your environment. Typically, as architects and designers, we're looking at, environmental factors, whether it's on a macro or micro level, right? Wind patterns, the sun pattern, how a sun moves, shadows. We even tasked with looking at things like security, right, and threats to our spaces. But oftentimes, because it's not a lot of Black people who are, architects and designers, we're not taking into consideration some of the cultural implications, that we should be considering. But again, it's limitless what you can use to influence your design, man. Sometimes it's driven by the client. Sometimes it's just a challenging area that you're in, right? You're building something in Alaska, or you in Hawaii, or you in Arizona, right? Different zones require, or you got earthquakes, right? You're out in LA, right? Different areas are going to require some different skill sets.
Okay, and that's important to say, because you have to be versatile enough, right, as an architect, in order, as any kind of artist, to be able to encapsulate an idea or solve a problem, especially with architecture, because a lot of times, you have a plot of land and you have to figure out what to do with that maximizes the space, but also maximizes the ability for the people in the area to utilize that space. So that's definitely a bar and a half. So we're going to put that on there. Did you have something else?
Yeah, and I was going to say, and it aligns with hip hop. So thinking about SOSA, and when I say hip hop in this case, right now I'm just thinking solely about the MC. I'm not thinking about the other elements, but it aligns with the MC, right? Thinking on this macro, large scale, micro scale, right? You need to be able to champion what's going on in your hood, in your area, right? You need to talk about, you can't just start talking about what's happening halfway around the world without, owning up, what's going on in your neighborhood to build that base.
Right.
So it's similar with architecture, right? You want to be able to adapt to what's going on in your immediate environment, and respond to those things first.
Right. Home is where the heart is, and you got to speak from the heart. So that's definitely true. So kind of getting into maybe like the more like futuristic ideas about architecture, what would a more naturalistic city planning map look like if you had the free range to be able to build or architect an entire city, such that people can live more freely and less boxed into like what we call blocks, right? So there's this idea that you live on a block, and in some cities, your block is essentially your entire world, right? So how do we build cities that kind of tap into the more biological or naturalistic kind of ways of life?
Yeah, man. If you ever look at like Google Earth or Google Maps, and you go to a neighborhood,
highly recommended for everybody on the stream by now.
Yeah, type in your address, you can see your house. If we got that, there's no telling what other people got access to. But all right. But you go to a neighborhood, especially something in, if I go to Detroit or, city like Highland Park, Michigan, and I look at a neighborhood, the way that we design, so urban planners, civil engineers, the way that we design a block, it's like 90-degree corners everywhere, like as if we walk and operate like robots. But something in the hood that's like genius, and you can see it on, from these aerial views, you can see these paths that people take, right? They cutting corners, right? They're not walking directly to the corner, making that 90-degree turn, and like and we call them indicative paths, right?
Indicative paths.
So it's this indicative path. It's like this is the route that people want to take, and there are, landscape architects or architects who are starting to pick up on those, or desired path. I see somebody putting some comments there. So it's just looking at design like we're not fucking robots, and having the software, dictate how we move. And then last thing about that is, two things. One, most of our cities are designed for cars. So the way that we move as people, it's all about, it's mostly designed for a car. People are second fiddle. Right, and now cities are trying to redesign spaces to make them more pedestrian friendly. And then you also have initiatives like, it's called the the zero. The name is eluding me right now. It's called Vision Zero. So this is a national initiative which tries to eliminate vehicular to pedestrian accidents, right? Because now people in cars trying to share the same space. Then the last thing I think is people who are trying to address what a futuristic city looks like. Some of them catching hella flack on social media right now, like Akon. Akon has this city that he's trying to build, in the motherland, right? And he wants to do it with his own cryptocurrencies. I think Acoin, right? But the architecture looks like more like that Frank Gehry, this more whimsical, organic architectural style.
That doesn't necessarily fit what the people of that area or the people who he might want to come to that area would want to necessarily live like.
I don't know. I don't know who he talked to, what those charrettes, what those ciphers were like. Right. But I think he's trying to make a space for us. But I'll just let people look at it, look up Akon City, and be your own judge. But I think we need to use technology, and we don't have to literally fly to another place right now. We can go to other places through technology, through web conferences, through virtual and augmented reality. How do we get people off the block? How do we allow them to interact with other folks? We can talk to somebody that don't speak English and we don't speak Chinese, right? We can have the internet and different apps be our interpreter in real time, right? So how can we expand our experiences for people on the block? I think is what we need to challenge. How do we build that within our cities? What's a bus stop? How do you pass that time while sitting at the bus stop? Can you visit somewhere else while you're sitting there? I think architecture needs to address some of those things.
And that kind of speaks to my next question. You pretty much addressed it, but I'm gonna just say, like, does contemporary urban architecture take the humanity out of living? And I think you kind of addressed that, where you're saying that we're not robots. We're not cars. We are not cars. We might have cars, and we might ride buses and stuff, but we are not those things. And so do you feel like lifestyle? Because we got the whole life is a freestyle. I'm gonna just cut out the is a free lifestyle in and of itself. Is that dictated by the way we live in the cities?
Or is it dictated by the person who designs the space that you move in?
Got it.
All right. So you think about, like low-income housing, and, it's designed like, again, using those aerial views, right? Most housing projects are like a crucifix, right? It's this cross, and it's extruded straight up. Whether you in Chicago, New York, like wherever, it's usually the same structure. They know it's fucked up, so they're destroying them all now, right? They're like, that was a bad move. Let's tear them down.
Whitewash.
Different, right? Right. But what that form was doing by these modern architects, I talk about it in the 10X a little bit, but this guy, Corbusier, he thought that he said his architecture was a machine. And if you put people in it, he can churn out a better person. This crucifix, right? It's this.
Or from the air, it might just be an X, just like X. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Exactly. Just Xing us out. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly, right? Yeah. But that's what he believed, man. And like he'll put these social programs in it, and he'll churn out a better citizen. It obviously did not work, right? It just became a place, like institutional racism, right? But yeah, I do think that architecture does limit our ability to live, because it literally houses all of the policies that impact our day-to-day life for good or for bad. And that's why I tell architects, we have to do something beyond bricks and mortar. Don't limit ourselves to just slapping materials together. Let's question the policies that people put in place when we design a structure.
Yeah. So we have a question in the chat, and I'm going to bring it in real quick. It says, what inspirations did you draw from while curating your museum of hip hop architecture? That's from one of our ITs.
Yeah, so it's called the Universal Hip Hop Museum.
Yes.
I wish it was my museum, but it's not. It is hip hop's museum. One of the first spokesperson for the museum was Curtis Blow, the director. His name is Rocky Bucano. So when I got brought on the project by Curtis Blow, I didn't want to draw from no inspirations. Like, I wanted to sit down with him, so he brought folks to the table, like himself. We had folks like Africa Bambaataa. They even had the Sugar Hill Gang. No matter how you feel about the Sugar Hill Gang, they were there.
Right.
Pioneers. And they brought young folks. So it wasn't about me drawing any inspirations. It was about, seeing what other folks felt and what inspirations they had. Had folks like Roxanne Shante. And then we even brought high school students. And we took over an abandoned building for like 3 days and just, had this cipher. So it was inspiration coming from all over, man. We had B-boys there talking about how the structure should be inspired by the movement of...
Nice.
So it was dope. So inspiration came from everywhere, everywhere and anywhere within the culture. I'll say that. That's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's the best.
No, that's a clutch answer, because at the end of the day, like, to your point earlier, we need to be able to tell hip-hop stories with our architecture. We need to not only be able to tell hip-hop stories, but we need to be able to tell stories of the roots of hip-hop, which in a lot of cases is Black culture, inner city culture, urban culture, unfortunately impoverished people culture, downtrodden people culture in America, and across the world. So let's slightly move to another topic here, because we were talking earlier about the different kinds of design sources, right? So people's imaginations, people's memories, and things like that. And then we have structures that are based on the cultures of those people from, of the people from those regions. So are there physical shapes and structures that haven't been built as functional buildings yet? Are there things like, obviously it wouldn't make sense to make a complete sphere, but we have the Epcot Center or something like that. But like, are there like shapes or structures that have been conceptualized but maybe never built because it was either never funded or because nobody ever maybe thought of it yet, and it's something that is maybe one of your students or one of the people on the chat right now will come up with in the future?
Yeah, man. So I've had this conversation before, and it's a tough one to answer because you don't know every piece of architecture that's out there. Sure. But there are shapes, and I challenge people to find these. There are shapes that people have said that we have lost throughout time, similar to words and language that we have lost.
Okay.
And these shapes have not been implemented. There's also shapes that people call these shapes that have power, like the it's like the tetrahedron. It's a shape that
the tetrahedron.
Tetrahedron, there we go.
Yeah.
It's like made up of every single shape that there is, right? It's like a mega tetrahedron. So I've heard people talk about some of these shapes that haven't been used to their full extent. But I think that's a tough one to answer, man. I don't know. But I would be interested in exploring what other people might share about that. Yeah.
And the tetrahedron, for people who may not be familiar, I'm gonna see if I can try to draw it really, really quick. I don't think I will.
And I went to public school too, so thanks for that phonics lesson.
It's all good. I'm learning like all of us. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe this is a tetrahedron. It's basically a box inside of a box. That is kind of a thing that kind of it's like a 5-dimensional shape that is not just a cube, but it's like a cube with one extra dimension on it that we don't really have names for. I think that's what a tetrahedron is, but I could be wrong about that.
No, you're getting it, and it's
Yeah.
like how can you use that shape architecturally?
Right.
What does it mean to walk in and inhabit a space such as that? And I think that's one of the, when I seen the question, that's one of the things that I immediately thought of. But I mean, think about pyramids, spheres, right? I was going to hit the Disney reference on the sphere. Like most shapes that we know and immediately think of, those primary shapes have been used.
Yeah.
But there's other shapes that, again, people believe have certain powers within those geometries, right?
Yeah.
People talk about, the Bermuda Triangle. Like, is there something beyond, that's inspired by the geometry of that region? So,
so let's
conspiracy stuff, but I think those are lost shapes that we don't even learn about those in school too much.
Very true. Very true. I mean, we know a lot of times that public education and just in general the American education system is kind of built to make people employees and not necessarily designers and creators and thinkers that are outside of the box. So that's part of the reason why, probably. But so I want to touch on what you just mentioned about certain shapes like pyramids and the power of them. Can you speak to the power of pyramids in architecture? Because I see that there are these things on like Etsy where you can buy kind of like a wireframe copper structure that's just a pyramid, and you're supposed to be able to sit under it and like meditate, for instance. And that shape by itself is supposed to do something with your energy field or with electricity or some I don't know exactly what it is, but can you speak to because obviously the ancient people that built pyramids possibly knew about the fact that these things can do something with invisible forces. So do you have any architectural kind of experience or background with understanding that?
I would say not with understanding that to some enlightened sense, right? Like I think architecturally, it's, for our profession, it's still baffling. One, how it was built. There's ridiculous scenarios out there saying that it must have been some extraterrestrial help, right, to get them done. How was it so mathematically accurate without the tools, the modern day tools that we have? But no matter what narratives are out there, I think that there is something that is within us that has been suppressed. And that's why I like listening to music like, music from Lupe or even music from Nas, right? His song, I Can, where he talks about pyramids. He talks about the first architects were us, right? People came to us for knowledge. And to me, it's comical that, architecture, right now there's a hashtag called Architecture So White. And it talks about how architecture has diminished throughout time, right? And once there were great master builders, there were these great architects, and now you can look at the scope of work that we do. It's sometimes limiting. Like, everybody's not doing some Frank Gehry crazy shit, right?
Right.
But the people who were those master builders were black and brown folks. But now in architecture, less than 2% of architects are black people. When you add in our brown brothers and sisters, we get up to like 8.5%, 9% of the profession. So the people who do have these connections to different religions, different understandings of our environments than what most Christians might believe, the world is missing out on experiencing space and place from every perspective.
That's a bar. Okay. I really love what you just said there. So shifting back to the future again, right? So in the near future, because I see a lot of articles and a lot of kind of studies about like smart cities. So there may be a plethora of smart cities in the let's say like the next 50 years, maybe 100 years, that are built to conserve and recycle energy and perhaps move large structures with the ease of elevators. Like we know elevators now that can carry, you know, these really big cars, and they're like Carvana, I think, is a company that has like these structures, I've seen in LA at least, that are just these towers of cars, and then you pick a car and it'll just come down some kind of like elevator, and you can see it through the glass tube, and it's crazy. But things like that exist. There's an anime from back in, I want to say, a Japanese animation from back in like the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, called Neon Genesis Evangelion, where they had a whole city skyline, and then because there were these, you know, attacking monsters, they would actually build a structure that allowed them to take the whole buildings and move them underground after sunset. And so that underground you could have like a reverse, a bizarro world of a skyline that people just continue to live in. So how do you think the idea of smart cities and kind of like the technological advancement of architecture and like city planning will affect the way we think about things like zoning and neighborhoods?
Yeah, man. Well, you know, zoning specifically, zoning is just inherently racist. Like where zoning came from, right? Dictating what can go where in certain neighborhoods. There's a number of artists, writers, I should say, and architects who talk about the racist tactics of zoning. But I think where technology can aid, you know, there's architects who have looked at these ideas like pods. So being able to, you know, have these living quarters, if you will, that you can take from one place to another. Think of it as a shipping container, right?
Right.
That, you know, you can now come and, you know, have your shipping container shipped from San Diego to Boston.
Right. Or like like modular homes, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that with some of the, you know, technology that we're seeing around, you know, access to, you know, fresh and clean water, might allow us to start inhabiting some spaces that we once thought were not inhabitable. But as far as zoning, I think, you know, it'll always be a way to control resources in a city. And there's people that, you know, there's a movement called Design as Protest in design justice, where architects and designers are coming together to overthrow some of these systemic, some of the systemic racism that's in places and spaces. And zoning is one of those targets. I mean, it limits what we can do. It limits the amount of financial resources that a city or community might be able to attract. So, yeah, zoning is just a nasty thing that it sounds cute. It's like, oh, you have to make sure that area is zoned for that. It's like, yo, who decided that?
Right.
Why?
Right. Facts. So how common is it when you think of all these skyscrapers and these skylines in cities, and even building houses 3 stories and higher in some cases, depending on how much money you got, I guess. How common is it to build underground as well as above ground, similar to like a tree's branch and root system? Because we know that from a naturalistic standpoint, you know, you're getting a lot of people who are trying to integrate green technology and planting, you know, plants and trees and stuff into these structures. But like the structure itself, you know, do we know any well-known tall buildings that have equally deep underground recesses, or is that like a new concept that hasn't really been like fully fleshed out yet?
Yeah, I don't know of any skyscrapers that's like a 1-to-1, like it's this tall and it also has that much of a depth. Like you think about Sears Tower in Chicago, what once was, you know,
Willis Tower now.
Yeah, Willis Tower. Yeah, some people ain't gonna never call it Willis. I never call it Willis.
I never call it Willis. What you talking about, Willis?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But like even that that foundation is like maybe 100 feet deep, right? It's nowhere near
Okay.
the height of the building itself. So I think that would be something new, or at least something that I haven't heard of. So, but I do like that idea. Like, yo, we can like save our hood. So imagine if the Move 6 in Philly, right? Their ship about to be bombed by by the police, right?
Yeah.
Let's go underground. But yeah, I wish I knew some examples to give. I think that would be something fairly new, man.
Yeah. Okay. I know that in ancient, like, I don't want to say Mesopotamia, but basically like the ancient portions of like the Middle East, Turkey, and places like that, they have like tunnels, an underground tunnel system, but nothing that's like necessarily straight down. So it's interesting to see that there are ancient buildings, if you want to call it that, or ancient tunnel systems or cave systems or whatever that have been built, but we haven't, as architectural kind of modern era, the thought hasn't actually been brought to fruition yet. But that'll be interesting if it does happen, because then there might be more opportunities to survive some of these like so-called cataclysmic events that we always have to worry about. Obviously, LA would not be a place that you want to build all the way underground because, earthquake. But
exactly. I mean,
anyway,
we got tunnels that go under the wall too, right? And if 45, gets it, there's gonna be some more tunnels that's being built. So
yeah, well, we building tunnels up under you, right? Shout out to Jay-Z, OT. So all right, so is it worth trying to build a building that emulates biological life, and has it already been done?
Yeah, man. So yes, it has been done, and it's always done. Right? We constantly refer to nature when we are designing. So an interesting story that people could definitely dig more into is George Washington Carver, right? One of the smartest men to ever look at botany, and took the peanut, worked at Tuskegee Institute and helped further Tuskegee. But an interesting thing about him, and me being from Detroit, and I'm actually from a little city in Detroit called Highland Park. This is where Henry Ford started the assembly line. He started it in Highland Park, Michigan. So Henry Ford actually got the idea of a plant.
Oh, yeah.
Washington Carver.
Right.
And he talked about, so George Washington Carver wrote a lot about how plants worked, like talked about the processes like photosynthesis and a number of other processes within nature. And he actually, so he visited Henry Ford. They had a well-known relationship with each other, friendship, I should say. I don't know. I'm not going to say friendship. They knew each other. I don't know.
They knew each other, yeah.
But,
associates.
Exactly. So there is this narrative out there that the whole idea of the plant, right? You hear people all day say, I work at the plant, right? I don't work at the factories. I work at the plant. That idea of, elongating, making the building longer, and being able to create this system that works within this elongated stem, if you will, came from George Washington Carver and his studies of plants. And that's a very well-known story. I learned about it when I was when I did a visit to Tuskegee, and just started to look at it because it was fascinating to me because I was from Detroit. Like, hey, Henry Ford, maybe he's not the genius we all thought he was. Was it George Washington Carver who put this man on?
Probably. There was a lot of things that Carver also did with soy as well, and we use soy in so many different things now in food production, but also the fibers, that we get that allow us to create certain types of materials and stuff like that. So shout out to George Washington Carver for blessing us with a bunch of inventions and discoveries and kind of ways to look at architecture, but also ways to look at just like natural processes and things like that. So
And then one other note too, there's a in architecture, there's a term called, I think it's like biomimicry, which is like mimicking, biological processes within the built environment. So I mean, there's people out there who are definitely interested, but I always try to link it back to the culture and Black folks and see where it came from. Forget the fancy name you came up with. Like, where did this idea really come from?
Right. And so speaking of like, Black folks, impoverished folks, and impoverished regions, can deserts, because we talk about food deserts in urban communities, but also, the actual deserts that are out there, because, we all as human beings tend to want to move towards cities. Tend to want to move towards cities that are near water, near large bodies of water, whether it's oceans, rivers, what have you. Can deserts of the world be urbanized with cutting edge architecture in such a way to reduce the need to live by coastlines, so that real estate in other places can actually be viable, if you will?
Yeah. So, shout out to Lupe on this one here. So I don't know if you're aware of like zero mass water.
Yeah, zero mass water. Yep.
So, which I didn't know about until about 3 years ago or so.
Same.
So, this, for people who don't know, but being able to create these, what we might think of as solar panels, but they're more like, they're water panels that extracts water vapor from the air, condenses it, and then turns it into drinking water, with this premise that there's water vapor everywhere. It's just
everywhere. Yeah.
How can you extract it from the air? So I think with technologies, such as Cody and his team at Zero Mass, I think those technologies will make some of these spaces more inhabitable, because water is one of the, the basic elements that we need for life. And more of us start to move out of cities, right? Because you had white flight and everybody moved from the city to the suburb, and we had the city, and we're like, oh, the suburbs look nice, we want to go to the suburb. And now they're like, okay, you can have a suburb, we need to get to the city so we can be near all of the fresh bodies of water. Will water be this? You can already see it being almost like a war weapon. It's been weaponized, like Michigan. And access to fresh, clean water is a challenge. So, shout out to people like Zero Mass Water. I think when you combine that with, architecturally, you can combine that with our ability to have, to take advantage of wind patterns and natural cooling effects that can make deserts or desert-like environments inhabitable. So, but water is key, man.
Definitely. All right, so we got about 5 minutes. I want to try to wrap this up in a good way to make sure that you have some time to kind of shout out your socials and stuff. So let me just address your camp, your hip hop architecture camp. So you have young people, which is amazing, getting into 3D modeling, getting into rap. They're writing their own raps. They're writing raps about architecture. And they're designing things through architectural design. So they're learning a lot of things at the same time, and they're learning how to integrate and fit all those things together. So for people out there who may be interested, how can they sign up to that?
Yeah, so if you're interested, you can go to hiphoparchitecture.com, and the camps happen normally through the summer, but you can fill out one of the forms that says, I want to attend a camp. You don't have to be a young person to fill that form out. We do ciphers with adults and professionals as well. But you can go to hiphoparchitecture.com.
Yeah. And can you speak a little bit more to what you've kind of learned or what you gained as a result of kind of bringing this camp to bear and making it something that people can use as a resource?
Yeah. So what I learned is, my hypothesis or my thought was that our music always talks about our environments, whether that was Motown, blues, country, rock and roll. Like, we're talking about our environments. Our lyrics are inspired by, our lived experience in the built environment. So I wanted to challenge young people to listen to music, but not just listen to it, but literally listen to all the words they're saying and try to respond to the problems that they described in the music. That was the first premise. And then can we, like to our earlier conversation, can they extract patterns and textures from music, turn it into architecture? And then last, make music that are about the places and spaces that they want to see, like, create their own tracks. So
speaking things into existence.
Exactly, right? So giving them that outlet. You don't have to talk about architecture. You don't have to have Archie speak and know all this stuff like facade and what the fuck is a facade? It's like, use your language that you've created. Like, everybody is trying to copy you. We make up words every day, and they reverberate around the entire world with a new definition. Like, let's use that genius and bring that into architecture. So we don't.
There's validity in that.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't pin up our drawings and say, well, here's the front door, here's the back door, here's the window. No, we spit a verse about it. Nice.
I appreciate that. So last question, and then you can give shout outs and stuff like that if you would like. Do you have any post-COVID plans that you're looking forward to? Because obviously architecture by itself, the design aspect of it is kind of an indoor, you can do it anywhere type of thing. But like the process of building the architecture is a very outdoor thing. And we see a lot of architecture being put up now in large cities while people are kind of in their stay-at-home orders. But, is there any big plan for maybe like a new camp or like the next camp that you have, or even something new? I know you still have the Universal Hip Hop Museum thing. So what is your plan for post-COVID once we open back up to the world, or the whole world opens back up?
My biggest plan for post-COVID is letting my son see some real people. I had my first baby December. He was born
Congrats.
New Year's Eve. Thanks. And he's seen very few people, right? Only a few people have actually had a chance to pick him up and hold him before all the COVID. So that's the first thing,
Yeah, for sure.
It's letting him see his family, meet folks, and be able to touch people and not just talk to them through a phone. And then after that, it's two projects close to my heart. The Hip Hop Museum definitely is one that's being impacted by COVID-19. So definitely looking forward to that project, getting back up and running. And then I'm also, working on some of my own work. So I have some custom furniture lines that I'm working on.
Nice.
I'll be dropping on Monday too, so people that follow me on IG, you'll see. And it's all about.
Let's get some likes in the chat for that. New furniture dropping Monday. Nice.
Yeah, and it's all for the culture. So it's using my design skills to raise money for young kids who are impacted by police brutality, right? So kids who have parents who are incarcerated, can we raise scholarship funds for them? Can we give them mental health services as they see people who look like them be killed every single day on social media? They're watching these videos. So how can I use my design ability to raise awareness? Like, we don't need no fucking awareness. Like, the videos are out there. How can we
it's too late for that.
Put their money behind the services that our young people need, and more importantly, give that money to people who've been doing that work for decades, not this glossy nonprofit somewhere that, is not even in the hood, really connected with the folks, but giving money to the people with boots on the ground. So you'll see that line that's dropping, but it's a dedication to folks who have lost their lives to police brutality or just straight up racist acts in America.
Wow, that's deep. That's deep. You definitely delivered more than 16 bars today. Mike Ford, I appreciate you for coming on. We all do. Everybody in the chat is loving you. So we want to thank you for coming on. And y'all check out hiphoparchitecture.com to sign up. And follow at Hip Hop Architecture and also at Hip Hop Architect. Thank you for joining us on this Freestyle Friday. This was definitely a one for the ages. Appreciate you.
Cool. Hey, thanks for hosting a conversation, man. And hopefully we can connect soon, and I can pick your brain on the other end.
Hey, I got a lot of stuff to pick, so definitely, man. I appreciate you. All right, peace out. All right. All right, y'all. So go to LifeIsAFreestyle.com to read our blog. We also have LifeIsAFreestyle.com/research. where we are putting together some research that we're doing on trying to make this this metaphor, life is a freestyle, something that's more real and tangible for everybody. And with that, I'm Stuby Kas. I'm out. Peace. All right.